I'm going to talk about something really personal this hour, and the reason I'm going to do it is as follows. First of all, many of you call me and ask me all the time, why don't you have kids? And I give a variety of reasons why I don't have kids. I mean, it is a lengthy list. But this is a particularly good time to talk about this because this week, had he lived, my father would have had his 75th birthday. And my dad died 12 years ago, so he never even saw his 65th birthday. But my father plays an integral role here. I'm going to tell you about my relationship with my dad, and I'm going to see if any of this sounds familiar. And maybe all of these stories I tell you about not wanting to have kids will make sense to you. My dad and I had a very complicated relationship. On the air, I have discussed some of the bad things that happened between us. And from hearing me say that on the air, you may be led to believe that I was ungrateful or just, one of those difficult delinquents or what have you. Nothing could be further from the truth. All the stories I tell you about dream killing, it came from watching my father, who, by the way, was never able to verbalize his feelings, was never able to talk about the things that bothered him. He just got angry a lot. When I was a kid, I mean a little kid, I loved him. And I not only loved him, but I was like a puppy dog. I would go anywhere to spend time with my dad. And it was a good thing because my dad was always working. He got married younger than he should have. Of course, back when he got married, that's when people got married, but financially he wasn't ready. He had kids, starting with me, when he couldn't afford us. And so pretty early on, he pretty much chained himself down. He tossed his dream out the window. He dreamed of either being a sports writer or a play-by-play sportscaster. He was never able to discuss the pain of losing his dreams. But the result of him losing his dreams is something I had to live with. My dad worked 3 to 4 jobs at a time and never, ever got off that treadmill of debt, credit cards, interest payments, first, second, and later third mortgages. He was always paying, never ahead, never any savings, never any investments. He would leave one job and head for the other job. I used to go with my dad to his job at the newspaper. Every Saturday morning, I used to get up and go with him. I used to stay with him in the office. He had to work until 1:30 in the afternoon. So we would go in early in the morning. If I recall, it was probably 6 in the morning. And we would be there until 1:30. Everybody in his office knew me. I sat at everybody's desk. I played with the stuff in everybody's drawer. I went through everybody's drawers, took out the pencils and rulers and staplers and everything. I was constantly playing with all the office equipment. Because when you're, 10, 11, having to sit in an office all day long with no work to do, not easy. It seems like a week rather than 6 or 7 or 8 hours. But I didn't care because it was the only way I could spend time with my father. The result of my father working so much was that he never got to enjoy the life he worked so hard for. Oh, sure, he had some vacation in the summertime later in his life and took some time off and did some barbecuing in the backyard. But mostly I will always remember my father coming home from work 9, 10 o'clock at night, sometimes later, tired, cranky, angry, and didn't want to be bothered. You ever been with a parent, usually your dad, comes home from work at night and doesn't want to be talked to, doesn't want to be bothered? He wants to eat his dinner in peace. Then he wants to sit in front of the TV and watch any mindless TV show just to dull the pain. When I was 13, 14, 15, and I wanted to spend time talking to my dad, he was never around. Oh, no, of course he was working hard, and he believed he was doing the right thing. But the result of all of that work, all that time out of the house, is that we were not close. When I had problems in school or problems in life, my dad was the last person I would talk to. And not only because he wasn't around or because he was angry. It was because he wouldn't talk to us either. He was constantly in pain. Mental pain, not physical pain, mental pain. As an adult, I learned to understand why he was so cranky, so angry, so miserable. Because in my mind, he gave up his dream. And he didn't even know what he was doing. He was too young to know what he was doing. Got married too early, had kids too early, gave up the career he dreamed of, and then worked the rest of his life. And of course, there he was, just cranky, and everybody's saying, you don't appreciate your father. He worked so hard. My mother and everybody else, you don't appreciate it. I do appreciate it. And as much as I've tried to be different from my father, I have things in common with him. I work hard. I come to work every day, no matter what. The difference between me and my father is, and it's something I learned from him, although I don't think he realized he was teaching me, I would never give up my dream for anything. Anything. Because I've seen the results of people who work in anger. People who spend every day not even understanding why they're mad or why they're depressed or why they're, just striking out at people. I know I'm talking to many people right now who try to get through every day, but there's just this anger. Or maybe it's your dad who's angry or distracted, or yells at you, or takes a swing once in a while. When I saw that up close, and when my dad sometimes and I were just so alienated from each other, we didn't talk for as much as a year and a half at a time, I vowed, no children, no giving up my dream, no disappointing somebody by not being around. I'm not going to do it. I refuse to do it. I didn't go to my dad's funeral when he died, and I don't regret it. In fact, I know it was the right thing to do for me. My dad was not very good at verbalizing his feelings, but he doesn't realize that he taught me an awful lot of life lessons just by being that cranky son of a bitch that he was, and many times appearing to be sad and miserable. Or at the very least, constantly working with no time to rest and no time to think and no time to enjoy himself. I love kids. And as I always say, that's why I don't have them. Because I know what happens if you can't be there for your kids. I know what happens if you have kids but you can't afford them, and then you have to work all the time. And then you treat them like crap because they just get in your way. You trip over their toys when you walk in the front door or whatever. Many times I have to answer questions from people about kids. Why don't you have kids? You don't like kids. You hate kids. Oh, no. I love kids. This week, my dad would have been 75 years old. It's my belief that the reason he died at 63 is because he just burned it out. The odometer went over 200,000 miles. He just couldn't do it anymore. I am not ashamed of what I did with my life. I learned from him, and I didn't make the mistakes he made. Oh, sure, I got married too young, and I copied a few things that I shouldn't have copied, because it's all I knew. But I've learned even from my own mistakes. And that is why I come in here every day and try to tell you boys not to do what people like my dad or maybe your dad have done. If you can't be there to raise your children, if you can't be there to enjoy them, you shouldn't be having them. If you can't afford children, you shouldn't be having them. If you haven't done the things in life that you want to do with your life, career, travel, whatever, you shouldn't be having children until you've at least accomplished that stuff. By the way, I think if you've done your traveling and achieved something in your career, you're going to be a much more interesting person to a child than if you're just working 10, 12-hour days or 2 or 3 jobs or 6 or 7 days a week. At 12 years old, I went to my father and I said, you know what? We live in this big house in the suburbs that you can't afford. I'd rather we sold this house, packed up, and moved back into the city, a little apartment. We're all together all the time. He didn't want to be bothered with hearing that. In fact, he slapped me. He reached out and slapped me and told me I didn't appreciate what he was doing. As an adult, I've never lived more than 30 minutes from work. I'll never commute. And I will never, ever disappoint somebody that way. Ever. Does this all make more sense now?